I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Friday, it's the Healing Circle. We work in association with the African American Child Wellness Institute. My partner and leader in this project is Dr. Bravada Akinsanya, who leads the Institute and who's the principal at Brakens Consulting. There's Dr. B. And joining us today, my colleague in journalism, Brenda Lyle Gray. Brenda, how you doing? Go ahead. I'm not hearing your voice. And then we haven't seen my niece for a few weeks. I'm glad to see her again, Lily Rankin. Lily, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good to see you again. And Dr. Oliver Williams, an institution in his own right. Dr. Williams is a professor of social work at the University of Minnesota, but the leader and creator of the work of the African American Institute on Domestic Violence. That might not be the exact right name, you'll correct me on that, but important work. Dr. Williams, good to see you again.
Glad to be here.
Dr. B, let's start with you and set the tone and the intention and the conversation for today's program. First of all, so good to see you as always.
And I'm going to,
my brother, and I'm going to pass the talking stick to you.
That's what I was going to say. May I have it? So,
Yes.
so as the elder in the group, I thank you for giving me permission to talk. And I want to acknowledge that we live and breathe and operate on land of the Lakota people. I also want to acknowledge our ancestors. Some of them recently departed, some of them long ago, but it's on their shoulders that we stand. And unless we forget that, we we'll have to continue to be like the Sankova bird that flies forward, but never forgetting to look back where we came from. And I also want to say libations in honor of our leader, Al McFarlane, our sister Brenda Lyle Gray, our brother Oliver Williams, and our baby but teenage commentary person, Lily Rankin. So as we step into this space, remembering that we use a talking stick because it symbolizes who has voice at that moment, but in our circle, it is the center that all of us have equal access to, the power of the center of the circle. So as we begin this healing circle today, acknowledging who's on this circle presently, but those many, many voices and ancestors and elders who stand with us, around us, and carpets us every day to go to do this healing work. We want to acknowledge them as we begin today in our discussion on which is entitled "You're Not Invincible," and talking to young people about COVID in their lives. So, with that, I'd like to start the conversation by actually starting with the voice of the youngest among us, Sister Lily, to just tell us when you hear that title about being You're Not Invincible and young people needing to talk about COVID, what comes to your mind? So, with that, I'm going to pass you the talking stick.
Thank you for the talking stick.
You're welcome.
I appreciate being on here for, you know, a while. I've been missed. I when I hear those titles and those words put together, it really is intriguing to me that this is the thing we're talking about today. It doesn't really get like taken seriously in my generation, and the fact of how it's hurting us a lot, especially for younger kids. And there isn't even like a vaccine for like 5 and younger now. It's like it's so serious, and it's such uh like blessing, I believe, to be able to take the vaccine at this moment in time because of how like very, very, very serious COVID has been and COVID is getting, and there's more variants, and it's the only thing that we can do to get better is collectively like notify the people around us and our peers to step up and actually, if you're not going to take the vaccine, separate yourself and actually understand what's going on, maybe take it later. But definitely for sure think about your actions and notify the ones around you. And that's what I think about it during and through my generation, because some of us don't really understand, don't really take the time to research into things, and we kind of just recklessly go. But if we do actually take the time to notify and self-aware ourselves, then we'll be better as a group, but also be put as more of an individual together, So yeah, that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Could I have the talking stick back just for a second? Thank you. Because I'm rather intrigued about the fact that you're seeing your generation as one, as we all did, that is a little more reckless with their lives because they have a sense that it's not going to be a foreshortened future. And we don't have a lot of experience when we're younger with death as much as we do it as we get older. But what you said a moment ago just taught me about the centering of families and how we center families around our children and our offspring, how there are our little, we're their world and they're ours. But as you get older, how your world expands. And that sometimes when it expands to the point where you are more influenced by peers than you are your internal teachings, that teaching our youth to hear their own voices, especially when it comes to safety and guidelines and protecting themselves, it's important for us to teach and to model. So when I think about family safety, I think a lot of my brother Oliver Williams. So, Brother Oliver, with this in mind, I'd like to just pass the talking stick to you.
Thank you. Picking it up. Well, I said something last time we were together, and as Al mentioned before, and as what you said, Bravada, as well, is the fact that different age ranges influence how people sort of see the world, and that young people sometimes think that they are invincible and that they'll live forever. And as you get older, as you said, you come to grips with losses that have existed in our lives. But I think sort of a recognition that we're not going to live forever. Um, and but I also think there are experiences. One of the things that I mentioned last week was the fact that we had experiences with getting vaccinated. Certainly, most of us when we got ready to go to school, because you couldn't get into grade school unless you had those vaccinations. But another thing, at least in my age range, was when people were getting polio shots, and to protect them from getting polio, because we saw the effects of it. I had an aunt that was affected by polio, and they didn't have the vaccination when she uh, uh, was young. They got it later. They developed it at the University of Pittsburgh, as a matter of fact. Uh, and uh, um, and so, and I guess that was something that sort of surprised me, but not given who is a former president. But what surprised me was the fact that we wouldn't collectively go into try to get vaccinated, because I have friends that are in Brazil and in South Africa where they don't have ready access to vaccinations, and that people are in those countries and in different parts of Africa and different parts of the world may not have access to uh, the different vaccinations to be able to keep death from visiting family and friends. So I wish we would have an opportunity to reflect on that as a people here. But I think the other thing is and I guess I was surprised that when I spoke to some people, there were some Black people I know that didn't get vaccinated, and I didn't understand what that was all about. I understand the Tuskegee experiments and how we've been mistreated, and people in different parts of the world, Puerto Ricans. My wife is Puerto Rican, and that they were also affected. They tested out the birth control pill on Puerto Ricans, and so they have been negatively affected as well. But this is one that we should have more comfort with. As a matter of fact, one of the creators of the vaccine was an African American woman. So we should be more thoughtful about it and try to do things not only to protect yourself, but to protect your family and your community. And we need to do that, to be thoughtful about that. So I'm passing the talking stick back to you, Brother.
Thank you for the stick. I like the idea of the social responsibility component that first was identified by our little sister Lily, and now expanded on by Dr. Oliver Williams. And I think that one of the people in our group who has to, I would say, the most experience talking to kids would be our sister Brenna Gray, who has been a school teacher and a phenomenal leader in terms of not just education but supporting the spirits of growing young people. So, sister, I'd like to pass the stick to you, because if anybody knows how to talk to young people, I'm just saying you had some experience, whether they wanted to hear it or not. So here you go. I'm passing it on.
I thank you, and it's so good seeing all of you. I'm just baffled by the attitudes. I really am. What are we at 70 million who are unvaccinated? And I keep thinking, is this political or is this just a loss of common sense? I was reading an article from the History News Network, and they talked about international travel. And they said it's just going to continue because people are going to continue to travel. They're going to bring it back to the States. And if we're not protected and with the booster, it's not going to go away. And I just don't understand what it is about that people don't understand. I heard this guy, well, not, I think Sherlin's example of the young man next door and the cigarettes. And I thought about that incident, I don't know what I'm putting in my body. And then Sherlin says, well, what about the menthol in Newport? I mean, and it's the same thing with food. We just don't know. Do we say, I'm not going to a restaurant because I don't know what the cooks are going to do with my burger and fries? I don't get it. And I sat in on a middle school class, a couple weeks ago at the Nelson Mandela Middle School. And this teacher was talking about COVID, drew a circle with the little spirals, talked about the protein on the ends, and just began to start a discussion with the kids about what they knew about the virus. And it was intriguing, and it was just off the cuff from a newspaper article. I think there's certain things that we owe our kids. They deserve to know the truth. And we need to figure out a way that we can tell the truth because it's not in the textbook. And this is life and death in their families, and especially elders like myself and my kindergarten friend. I mean, it's I don't know. I'm really struggling with it. And thank God I finally got my daughters vaccinated, and they're grown, but going through the millenniums, they're not vaccinating. I don't know. I'm going to pass it back to Al.
Thank you, Brenda. Such a great question. Number one, how do we think about how do we describe this sense of invincibility that appears to be among the young people? But I raised the question, Dr. B, in my own life, and it just made me think back about how I approached my presence when I was younger. And the story that always pops in my head when I think about this is I remember a North Minneapolis businessman who owned an insurance company coming to my house. I was 22 years old. I think I bought my first house at 22. And he said, you need to buy some life insurance. And I almost scoffed at him. And I said, life insurance, that's for losers, people who think that they are at risk of dying. And I think I probably said, then I'm not going to die. Boy, what a fool. What a fool, right? And so how is it that young people are able to grab onto foolishness, foolish ideas, ignorance, right? And then be prepared to defend it. And I think I was almost defensive and somehow arrogantly dismissive and rude to a businessman who was trying to, number one, do business. I understood that, but also the business proposition I resented because I felt that to want to be planful, think about the future in a long-term way that he was suggesting thinking about financial planning does for you and insurance does for you. Thinking about all of that in my idea at 22 was a sign of weakness, and that the sign of strength that I called myself hanging on to, the false bravado of being in it for the moment, right? And therefore feeling invincible, helped me make stupid decisions like not buying insurance at that time. And it took 10, 15 years before I grew up and got wise enough to understand, the value of planning and commerce and financial, et cetera. So how does that apply to the current question about the young people today and the reticence or their indifference or their resistance or their inability to see long-term and to see their health long-term? Somehow we have not succeeded in educating ourselves and our children and our families about the broad expanse of what it means, to be human and to be accountable and to be not only responsible for yourself, but your piece of the family, right? So that you don't become a burden on other people, but that you, in all that you do, enriches and enhances the lives, the experiences, the community of everybody around you. That training, I think, is something that we sort of either need to get back to or think about and develop. That's why I love what we're doing here. That's why I love the idea of the protocol of the talking stick. This is a method of training us how to be with each other with order and with planfulness, with respect. And it's real simple. It's easy to do, but we don't do that enough in all of our exchanges with each other. And I hope that we can. So I've kind of walked a long way, but I think what I'm saying is what's on my heart right now, in my mind. And I think this is an important topic. COVID and our community responding to it. I think it's absolutely essential that we spend every opportunity that we can talking with friends, family, neighbors, young people in particular, and people my age group, our age group, Brenda, always asking in a polite and non-judgmental way, but in a way that affirms and confirms and that reflects our intent. The intent is guided by respect and love, right? And our questioning should have that feeling that because I love you and because I care for you, I'm asking you what your status is. What the status is. I see that our friend Sam Cook is monitoring the program from YouTube, I think, or from Facebook. Sam, he's saying he appreciates the talking stick. So thank you, Sam, for watching and putting the comment. And if anybody else is monitoring the program on social media, we want you to be involved in this conversation as well. We want you to like it, share it. If you want to actually get on the program, send me an email and I can bring you into the conversation, Sam Cook or Michelle Madison. We talked about having you. You're here all the time. We appreciate your comments and your commentary in the comment section along the program. So with that, I will pass the talking stick back to Dr. B. One more thing, Dr. Williams, at some point in time, if not today, but maybe today, I just haven't had a chance to have you talk about your career and your path as a educator and as a healer and as a doer. So if today is not the day, and maybe it will be today, I'd love to have you take some time talking about your approach, your path, what brought you to where you are as a leader, as a thinker, as a healer, educator in our community. But with that, I'm going to pass the talking stick back to Dr. B. And you unmute, yeah.
Yeah, I
There
am.
we go.
I appreciate getting the stick back, and I really am thinking about what are the barriers to connecting with young people when we go to talk to them about anything that they need. One of the things in my, I'm a clinical psychologist. I've been working for 40 years. And one of the things that I've had the pleasure of doing is working with children who are infants with attachment issues, all the way up to people who are geriatrics in their 80s and 90s. So that whole life developmental spectrum has shown me something. And it's shown me that trauma from early on will last a lifetime if not resolved and dealt with. It also has taught me that the way we engage with children is often more disrespectful to them than we realize. So what I found is that kids tell me that when grown-ups go to make a point, they start lecturing and it takes too long. So if you're trying to make 2 or 3 points and it takes you an hour to tell them, by the time you get to that 10-minute mark, it sounds like they don't hear you. They're checking out. And so you've just wasted all your breath and you haven't taught the lessons you need. So that's one thing they've taught me. The second thing that they've taught me is that they have a sense of knowledge that they can tap into with their spirits. They have that sense of knowledge and knowing. And unfortunately, what happens is nobody gives them credit for at least knowing a little something. So when I hear kids saying, I'm big now, I'm grown now, and they're like 13, you all know they are not grown and they're bigger than they were at 3. So that is true, but we have to honor the gains they've made. And then the final thing that I think about is the brain development literature that tells us why we make dumb mistakes. It's because before you get to age 26, your brain still isn't, most of the development has not happened until you hit 26. And I look back on when I was in my 20s, and even before that, I really did some dumb things. So when I think about it, I say, oh, thank goodness that some of us hit 26 and things started going uphill in terms of our prefrontal cortex helping us to make better decisions. So if we live long enough, we will make good decisions. So I'm going to pass the stick. I think I want to pass the stick to Brother Oliver because you did set it up for him to tell a bit about his work, which really involves the impact of domestic violence on the psyche and development of our community. So, brother, if you don't mind taking the stick, I'm passing it to you.
Well, I'll take the stick. And I'm glad you're interested. I don't mind talking about it. I started out, actually dealing with domestic violence when I was in undergraduate school because I saw some of my classmates, deal with that issue. As a couple that were friends of mine, and I saw them take the young man out in a gurney, and because he was being violent towards his girlfriend, but he was so upset that they called emergency and brought him, out in a gurney. And then talking to other people that I knew, also recognizing that it happened, in their lives and their situations as well. And then as a young man, you talk about good decisions or bad decisions. I think I had to reflect on my attitude towards women, which was similar to other men's attitudes towards women at the time, and that was something that was had to be developed and understood. And then when I went to graduate school, back in the days when I was in undergraduate school, there were no battered women shelters. Was no batterers intervention programs. There was no education program to try to inform people about the issue of domestic violence. There were no prevention programs. Police didn't have a good handle on how to approach it. They would go to a guy if the police was called to someone's house, and what they did was they walked them around the block until they calmed them down and then let them go. And there was no discussion about trauma that women experience, or the trauma that battered women experience, but also children that come from families where there's domestic violence, and how that affects them, and how long they have to live with that. Some people, I think people can heal. I've talked to women that talked about 5 stages of healing. In the process, we talk about being a survivor, and some people talk about being a thriver. But I think there are people who, in my practice, who said that they wanted to heal. And I worked in battered women's shelters. I've worked in as a child welfare worker and a delinquency worker over time, and then I've developed batterers intervention programs. One that's in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that I through Catholic Charities, that I developed back in the day, and it still exists. And then work with a number of programs around the country, and then eventually around the world, in different locations, and talking about the fact that how people are, really affected by it. But we also have to understand the stories of the people from the communities in which they come from. One of the things that I found is the fact that unless we listen to the stories of the people who come from the different communities, you don't know what things to acknowledge and what things to confront. You miss it, and so when you're talking about people who come nationally or internationally, you have to understand the way that they see the world, and if you don't understand those things, you'll miss it. And one of the things that I think about is my friend Elizabeth, when she comes on, and she talks about how when you're if I'm an African American, I'm an American, and that people may appreciate the wisdom that I bring, but the other thing is the fact that they don't think that we know everything, and that there's certain things that we do know that's helpful, but it may be more helpful for populations that we live within the United States. But what's also important is when we serve people who come from different communities, we have to understand their story too, or else we miss it. So, those are some of the things that I think about when I think about my journey, is to be able to understand my story, but also understand the stories of other people who come from different communities, and how they see the world, and how we need to embrace their thinking, but also the things that can help them to engage, but also some of the things that may push them away from addressing the issue. And I was doing a study a few years ago, and that there are some people that came in a little late, and they were very quiet as they were coming in, and very respectful. And we ended up taking a break. And when we took a break, we found out that they were from different countries. They were Black, but they were from different countries, and that and I also knew that there was a story that they weren't sharing because they were coming from a different a country. And the ways that people start to respond to issues based on their faith, the ways that as well as the culture. They're when I've worked with people who come from different countries, they may end up uh, talking about how they have a right to do things, and that they have a right the way that they look at women and the way that they behave towards women, but also the number of women that they're allowed to marry. And sometimes it's and that philosophy we talked about Islam is a myth. And the reason why Muhammad ended up doing it wasn't for the reason that I think a lot of people think so. He was trying to bring in women who had lost husbands, and and trying to help it to support and shelter people who didn't have someone to help and support them. And it wasn't something where people felt like they could do it just because they want to. And I've had conversations with some imams. I did a roundtable. I think you can see it on the will2change.org website, where we did a roundtable and we had conversations with imams, and there was and the imam had made a comment about just before we sat down, where he was telling me and telling another brother who was there that we needed to go back to his home country and marry a younger woman because we could. And it was the right thing, because that's what he was going to do. He's going to give up his partner and go and get somebody who was much younger. And that wouldn't work in my household, because I've got this woman who wouldn't appreciate that. And I don't want to get hurt either. So the thing that I think about with that is the fact that, we get a chance to get into a conversation with him, where we got a chance to confront him about it. And it was interesting, there were other women who were there, African women who were there, who were making the comment about his thinking and how he was minimizing some things. And they got a chance to confront them in terms of what their life experience was and how they understood things, but also their understanding about what the Prophet had said, along with other imams who got a chance to sort of support it and validate it and understood it as well. So, I just think that there's something about understanding the voices of people that we, hope to serve and be supportive of them. And I think that's the thing, Pravada, when you made the comment about, learning things over time, that was a big difference from being in my 20s to being older, where I understood and was open to listening to somebody else's experience and reality, but also in the different places that I've worked. I think also seeing people who were affected by the negative behaviors of other people who didn't take their issues and their experiences into consideration. So, and how it affect the African American community, because when I started, they weren't really talking about people of color at all. There was no conversation about how Black people were affected. So it started looking at the experiences from of African Americans, but then it got broader in terms of understanding the stories that other people had to share and how they had a hunger to tell their stories to heal their community as well. And so that's something that I think is real important. And as we have these continued conversations, as we bring other people in to be able to speak about some things, it would be interesting to be able to hear their stories. I know Yele is from Nigeria, and but I've been to Kenya and been to South Africa and been to Canada and been to Germany and been to, a number of places around the world. And each place has its own story, in terms of what the experience is for the people in the community that you're interacting with, and to the UK and the different challenges that people experience, and the different people of color in those different communities that have their different stories, and the different ethnicities that exist among the Black people that are in those communities too. So, embracing all that, I think, helps us to have a similar or a more enriched whole, that we can experience. So that's brief, but it tells you a little bit about my process. So I hand this stick back to you.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. What I'd like to do now is just kind of I was going to say recalculate, but review kind of what we've talked about so far and some of the nuggets that I've seen coming out of it. One of them that you just shared, I think very clearly, is the need to recognize the person who is often disenfranchised, or the voice that is often muted or overlooked. And when I think about our children, many of us were raised that children speak when spoken to, that they don't have a voice, they don't have anything to share. And so when we're talking about how to talk to kids and pass on that idea of the fact that they're not invincible, there's a piece of it that is kind of scary, because that scary piece is that you could die. That's the opposite of not being invincible, is to realize that you could possibly die. And so the exposure that our young people have to life-threatening situations, I think plays a role in how they respond to disease like COVID. The degree to which they feel they are threatened every day by different phenomena, whether it be drugs, alcohol, gangs, driving too quickly, risk-taking, AIDS, HIV, whatever they think that may be threatening their lives. I don't know how real that is to them. And I'd like to take the talking stick once again and pass it to Lily Rankin. If you would mind just sharing with us, I know you're not all teenagers, but you do belong to that group, and just your personal wisdom around what would help us to convey to other young people that COVID is real and that their lives are in jeopardy by not taking those steps that you described earlier and precautions. So let me pass the stick to you and see what you can teach us about walking in your shoes.
Okay, so I have a few things to say about that. I want to go back to when you were talking about how you've worked with kids and how they've said that like lectures have taken to like hours, it's just ended, and you don't really take in the information that your elders are telling you, which is important. But also the fact that you said that will really click with me is that you said that it's like almost disrespect, and it's more disrespectful than you think it is, which it's just what I have to say for that, for me specifically, is it's just respect goes both ways. And most kids, especially POC, get told like they're being disrespectful, even when they're not trying to. It's just the way that they were taught around their peers and where they've grown up. It's the fact of how they talk, and it's getting brought up into conversations with their elders, which might not be used to that because that's not how they've grown up. And they were told to not talk back and not have a say in things. And If this is said, this is how it goes. And kids now are being taught to say how they're feeling, and actually acknowledge and understand what is going on around them, and actually have a say in what they feel. And for that to be put into a conversation with elders, it feels like almost headbutting. And it might be deemed as disrespect because of the fact of portraying their own voice. But besides those points, it's how COVID is one of like the biggest deals that we've had in our lifetimes. This is in Gen Z's and my teenagers, and even like the young babies to like 20-year-olds. It's a big thing for us specifically. Um, and we don't really realize it's real until it's like right in front of us. And I feel like that's one of our downfalls in how much we are losing our like group of people, because we don't really take it into consideration for us, and we kind of brush it off as it's not going to happen to us, which is the invincible thought that we have, until it actually happens to a family member, or yourself, or your parent or guardians, or anything that's close to you. And then you start taking it serious. Me personally, I wasn't able to get the vaccine because of family, and I'd always wanted to get the vaccine, but I wasn't able to because I was told that it wasn't for me and that I couldn't get it. But after I was able to, after I was able to get it, I felt better, not only with myself, but with being able to say that I've gotten the vaccine, and say that I'm a part of something that I wasn't able to be a part of for how long we've had the vaccine out. Um, and I feel like it pushes, since I've had it and a few other of the people that I know and that I talk to have had it, we actually talk to other peers that we have, and like describe how important it is to have the vaccine and be able to say you have the vaccine and be safe in that way, not only for yourself but for others. And we've influenced other people to get the vaccine just because of us speaking from experience. And I just feel like it's such an interesting thing, not only from our standpoint but from the world standpoint, especially from people with color and Black people, because there are people, like some of you said, that don't get the vaccine because of what happened. And that's what some of my family members were so non-urgent to get it, because of all of the things that has happened to Black people and the vaccines that were getting put onto them, and working and pushing that bad stuff onto them and being experimented on. It's a very scary thought and almost traumatizing to be put and hear these stories from your elders, to be put from your standpoint. But noticing that and realizing that it's gotten better, and though like the experiments have not happened that like in our state now, and that it's a better environment to be able to get them, is just one step forward in making yourself achieve more in your own health. And it helps a lot of people, especially being able to say from a peer standpoint. So that's what I have to say about like the entire COVID situation, because I feel like it's very interesting. It's a very interesting topic to talk about from my group and my generation, because we don't really bring it up as much as we should. It's not really portrayed in school as much. It's only just like a wear your mask kind of thing, and it doesn't go from there. But I feel like if we like notify and let understanding go by, and not only the teachers but at school in general, it would push into a better environment, period. So I pass the talking stick back to Dr. V.
Thank you, Lily. I enjoyed hearing from you. I think we all did, with a sense of pride in hearing your wisdom and your ability to just grasp the key areas that we need to talk about. And I think one of the things that made me feel happy a moment ago was I always think in terms of circles, and I think of the African centered wellness model that my life and my work is around, and the whole thing is to promote generations of liberated Black young people so that when they are older, they recognize their right to wellness. And in your talk, you hit on several African-centered values. One was Kujichagulia, self-determination, that we have choices that we can make. And some of those choices can be life-saving, and we can choose to teach and educate each other. That led us to the discussion of the beautiful thought of umoja, which is about social wellness. That my brothers and my sisters, I am their keeper. We keep each other together. I am because we are. You even hit on ujima, and ujima is about collective work and responsibility. Let's work together and take care of each other. Is that social, powerful belief that I get to choose what I do because I know it affects you. And if I know it affects you emotionally, that's teaching me that one, I'm not alone in the world. And two, I'm also responsible to and for others. So I loved what I just heard coming out of your mouth. I'm just putting a label on it, but that is exactly what I see. So I'm going to pass the talking stick to my brother Al so he can just wrap it and keep it rolling.
Well, I want to acknowledge the people that are joining us in the digital space, and Michelle Madison, probably responding to earlier conversation and your presentations, Dr. Williams, asked, what do you think about the shooting at the high school in Arlington, Texas yesterday? Some people are defending, I'm reading her comment, some people are defending the shooter because of a history of getting bullied. So what are your thoughts? Also, what do you think about metal detectors in schools? So this goes straight to the question of violence in young people, and Lily may want to respond to this as well. But all of it to me adds up to this massive global pressure that I think everybody is feeling, and it's appearing in different ways in different places, but nobody is immune to it, right? And there are certain things that reflect the potential for things to escalate to the level of horrific. And this is certainly one of them. But Dr. Williams, I'm going to pass the talking stick to you. What are your thoughts? And
Among the things, Brother Al, is the fact that what Bravado was talking about with regard to age and decision making, and that young people may not be equipped to make decisions given some of their life experiences, but what they tend to think about when they're at certain ages. The other thing is the fact that a lot of people who end up being violent folks end up being bullied when they were young. And as a consequence, then they take out their anger and frustration on people given the environment that they're around. And if you don't come from an environment where you can problem solve and that you can think of alternatives to violence and then actualize that, then you may end up repeating those things that you experience. Some people who were violent were victims of abuse or come from households where there's violence and abuse. and then they visited on people who are in their environment. So it may not be a surprise that they use violence towards others in their environment. There's a lot of guys who were bullied and then become the persons that have the problems later on. And we've got to find ways to be able to deal with that and have them talk about other ways to be able to deal with conflict without the use of violence, and then feel comfortable with that choice. But you have to have environments that support it too. So I went into a school where there was a young person that was being bullied. And have you seen those commercials recently about people, giving advice about depression? And then the person says it was unhelpful, that wasn't the right thing that they should have said, right thing that they should have done. Environments have to be thoughtful about that. Schools have to be thoughtful about that. High schools have to be thoughtful about that. Elementary schools have to be thoughtful about that and teach people different ways to be able to respond to it. So the other thing is the fact that I don't understand the states that, I guess we're one of them, that encourages people to carry weapons with them, or the notion about stand your ground. I mean, I don't get that either, because the solution to addressing the situation isn't always to be able to have a weapon and to use violence as a way to be able to respond to a conflict situation, particularly when you haven't encouraged other ways to be able to deal with it. But I know in certain environments, young people are fearful, and sometimes they use violence as a way to be able to deal with the fear that they're dealing with.
Can I
And so
jump in?
Go ahead. No,
I just want to say that you're really hitting on something when you talk about young people being fearful. I was consulting at a school, and the little child was in kindergarten or first grade, and the child brought to school an apple peeler or potato peeler, because on the way to school every day, the people who were like crack addicts or something on the street down his school was just waiting for the block, down the block waiting for the bus. They would take his money or take his lunch. And so the little child brought that to school for those big people who were on drugs, who were trying to harm her or him. And the child got suspended, 5 or 6 year old, because they brought a weapon to school. And so some of our things need to be, and I told the school, I said, you shouldn't be worried about the weapon. You need to be asking why. Why does she feel like she needs to have a weapon? And what can a not even 3 feet tall child do to an adult? And he's so afraid. So we have a culture of guns. We have a culture of violence. And I know that Sister Michelle, who brought the question in, she's got to know, just 2 weeks ago, we had a shooting in the high school of our own. It's not just in Texas. We just had it the other day. And so part of the things that we have to look at is how our culture does not promote problem solving. Kids will be at school. They will know. There was a study, a Gallup poll by children, said that 70% of them knew somebody had brought a weapon to school, but wouldn't tell on them. 70%. That means only 30% of the kids would say something. And the 70% of kids who did not say, said they wouldn't say, is because what are the teachers going to do anyway? They're not going to do anything. They're just going to say, ignore him. So until they see a gun or something like that coming into the schools, kids know that teachers themselves don't have good problem-solving skills. Parents themselves don't have good problem-solving skills. So one of the things we need to teach is teach people how to teach problem-solving skills that aren't involving violence. Now, with that, I know we got only 1 or 2 minutes. I'm going to pass it quickly to Lily because I know you wanted to hear from her. Then I hope she'll pass it back to you.
Okay, I have a few things to say about this topic. And I'll try to wrap it up quickly. So speaking of the school shootings, I just had a school shooting threat in my district, and it was very scary for us because we've never really had a serious threat like that before. And not only it being isolating, but the fact of what the others were saying and the parents and the family members were saying was baffling to me, because we have Irondale and we have Mounds View, and Mounds View was the one that got the school shooting threat, and it was from a white kid who said that he needed to kill 50 people to go to heaven. And it was terrifying and upsetting, and all the families were notified through email, including our school as well. We've had police officers outside of our school, and the parents online were saying something so incredibly crazy. It was insane. There was a woman who said, "Oh, coming from Mounds View, because it is a richer, more white populated school, Mounds View is, and Irondale is mostly an art school. It's very more diverse other than Mounds View." Mother said, "Coming from Mounds View, this is surprising. We thought Irondale was ghetto. And we went, and someone went, "Excuse me, what's wrong with Irondale?" And they were like, "Well, it has more kids that live in apartments there, that live there, and that go to Irondale." And we were all shocked and taken back at how ignorant people are to this, and to the fact of school shootings, and how much more it's populated between the people that feel isolated and that don't have anyone else to talk to, compared to, say, our school, who is very, very, very inclusive. We have more Black and POC teachers than our entire district. It's just baffling how they could think that the apartment living space and the POC people going to this school would portray more of a school shooting and a ghetto look than Mounds View, that actually did receive the threat. And I just found that so interesting. Said from a mother as well, and a family member that goes to the school. It took me back. It baffled me a little, because the fact that you have so much, and it was a white mother as well, and so the fact that you feel like you have so much power and high up placement to say that kind of thing is unfortunate, because it's not always true. That just because we are Black or Native or Asian or African American or Mexican or Latino, that we have more of a ghetto look at our school, when we excel beyond them in our school's academically, period. I just found it very, very interesting, and I had to make sure that I shared it today during this entire call.
Thank you, Lily.
You're very
Lord have
welcome.
mercy.
Welcome
Brother
to
Al.
America.
Yeah. And with that, I'll pass the talking stick to Al McFarlane.
Brother Al.
Thank you. Lily. What a powerful testimony. I'm rereading two things. One is the narratives of Frederick Douglass. And if you haven't read it, it wrecks you on the inside. When you read it, it makes you mad, makes you burn to live the life he led through his voice, through his eyes, through his narrative about this condition of enslavement, in which you, from 24/7, were owned. You were the property of other human beings, and his analysis in the chapters of the book talk about the differences, the gradations of horror, right? Which white owners were less horrific than other white owners, but all of them horrific. Which ones were kinder? It's kind of everything that I'm reading in the book just puts me in the mind of analyzing how power structures work right now and right here in this community and in the world. And I'm also I'm recommending that to people just pick up Frederick Douglass's book. It's his own story written by him, and it's the narrative of his enslavement and his movement from that to freedom and his recounting of that. And I'm also I'm writing a foreword for a new book of columns written by our own culture and education editor, Dr. Irma McLaurin. But in reading it, I'm reading over stories she wrote over the past 10 years. And she selected around 20 of them to go into this book. And I'm putting together the foreword to it. But in doing that, I'm just remembering how incisively she examines where we are in 2012 and 2014 in some of the essays, and 2016 and 2020, looking at the Romney bid against Barack Obama, looking at and presaging the Republican Party and its pivot towards Donald Trump. Donald Trump was a curiosity in the Romney bid, but as it turned out, the Romney bid set the stage for the emergence of this madness on the right that resulted in Donald Trump's election. So anyway, these are the things that are on my mind. I'm so glad to have this forum to talk about it, but hearing Lily talk about the incredulity, of these parents' assumptions about, and this is really a reflection of white privilege, right? They feel they have the right and they have the ability and the privilege to condemn and condescend when the truth is apparent that the deficiencies are on their side of the street, not on our side. Wholeness, health, healing, and capability of connecting across what are ultimately superficial boundaries that exist in our community. She just said that. And so we have to pay attention. Lily, thank you so much. I'm out of here. This has been a great conversation. Join us again next week. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Dr. Williams. Thank you so much, Dr. B, and thank you, Lily. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you on the ground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity with their bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you break.
We've had enough
of all the money you make.
We've had enough.
No more life at stake.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation.
It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait.
Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you were breaking.
We've had enough
of all the money you were making.
We had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We had enough.
This is a proclamation.
Free or guilty,
It's gonna get filthy.
you better believe. Just roll up your sleeves.
It's gonna get rough. It's gonna be tough.